Welcome everybody for this next edition of the Thinkers Dialogue. We have a very special guest today. We have Roger Martin with us today, who's just one of the most prolific thinkers in the world. In fact, just as a quick introduction, he was ranked amongst the foremost thinkers in the world. In fact, number one on the list in 2017 by Thinkers50. In fact, Thinkers50 is something that I've been involved with, Des and Stu, for a long, long time, for the last 8 years, and it's just been an exciting journey. But following Roger's work has just been a cherishable moment for me. In fact, other than that, in fact, he's been an advisor, CEO, advisor to the CEOs of companies. He has worked with people like Procter and Gamble, Lego, Ford, and then of course the most important thing is that he's done 28 articles with HBR and done tons and tons of books, but about 12 of them. But some of the significant ones are Getting Beyond Better, Fixing the Game, The Design of Business, Getting Beyond Better, Playing to Win. And those are the books that have been done. In fact, other than that, he was actually the dean for the foremost business school in Canada. In fact, if I'm not wrong, and if I hazard to say, he was the person who transformed the Rotman School of Business. And if Roger recollects, we have a very interesting history together as well. In fact, we created the Prosperity Institute of India in collaboration with the Martin Prosperity Institute a number of years back, and I had a great chance of working with his colleague there as well, Kevin Stolarik and Richard Florida. So we did a couple of reports together and things, and we have been able to propagate that work as well. But we also have another special guest here today, Mr. Arun Maira. In fact, Mr. Maira is somebody that everybody would know, like a prolific author himself, worked with the Planning Commission, worked with the Prime Minister Manmohan Singh, and one of the foremost economists. So today the interaction is going to be led by both of us. We thought we'll just change the format today a little bit. Mr. Mehra, thanks a lot for joining. Roger, thanks a lot for joining. It's just been an honor to have you with us. So we'll quickly dive into the conversation. Roger, the world has changed so significantly in the last 1 year, and your new book, which is talking about overcoming obsession with economic efficiency, is very, very significant at this time of turmoil. Could you just give us an idea as to what propelled you to work in that area and to really work on this book?
Sure. Well, as you well know and talked about before, I've been working on sort of public policy. I do a lot of work on strategy, but my other, love, I guess, is the world of public policy and economic development, and I've been working on that for many years. I got appointed to chair a commission on competitiveness, productivity, and economic progress in Ontario, and that work got me worrying increasingly about the stagnation of middle incomes. So I saw it because I started that work in 2001, and I was watching the economy grow. Right, in North America, I was mainly focusing on North America, Ontario versus comparable U.S. states, and the economy was growing, but median income was not. And I was like, that's interesting, because that's not the way it had been for a long time. If you go back to post Second World War, kind of American economics in particular, the median income kind of grew pretty consistently with the economy. And so I started asking myself the question, hey, how will democratic capitalism as we know it today fare in a world in which the swing voter, because I sort of thought of the median family in economic terms as kind of the swing voter, at least maybe not that particular family at exactly the 50th percentile, but the band around the 50th percentile. That band is the swing voting band, and if they stagnate for a long period of time, will they continue to support the system of democratic capitalism that we have? So that's and my preliminary answer was, gee, I'm not sure they will. Like, they supported it for the entirety of American history, right? Because they benefited from, right? So in the Great Depression, right, which is a worldwide depression, as you well know, most of Europe went either fascist, socialist, or communist, and Japan headed in a fascist direction, but America stayed staunchly capitalist, moved to the left. Franklin Delano Roosevelt moved the political spectrum toward the left, but it was still, avowedly a capitalist. So, so Americans had always stuck by democratic capitalism, even in a situation as bad as the Great Depression. But I started looking at that and said, you know what? The middle class is doing worse now, right, since 1976 than they did in the Great Depression, right? And so that's the motivation. The motivation of why is that happening, and what are the potential implications of a long-term stagnation of the median family income in America.
So, like as you were talking about incomes, and in your book, you touch upon a very important aspect, and that is what you're talking about, economics of being a teacher. And as I was reading the first few lines of the book, I was just startled to know as to what is really happening. Could you share that thing? Because you're talking to those two teachers, because they are the nation builders in many, many ways, and they are
Absolutely.
the pain of how capitalism is possibly not functioning for them.
Yeah.
How do you really look at that situation as well?
Yeah, well, we started the book with a vignette from our Persona project, where we went out and interviewed kind of real, kind of average Americans to see how they were experiencing, American, essentially democratic capitalism. And this was a teacher who had a master's degree, elementary school teacher, had a master's degree, and was in North Carolina. She'd come originally from upstate New York, and where she got an education, moved to North Carolina to teach, and she was genuine, like she was genuinely angst-ridden about being unable to make ends meet on a teacher's salary. And what was so kind of stunning for her was, she had done it all right, right? She was told, right, as she grew up, if you get an education, and of course she got an education that a minority of people get, a graduate degree, right? In her passion, which happened to be teaching, she loved teaching. That would it make the most spectacular economic life where she could buy 100-foot yacht? No, but it would make a life where she could take care of herself, her child. She had one child. She was a single mom at the time of the interview, and she had to take jobs in the summer because in most American states you only get paid during the school year, and she essentially, that salary enabled her to kind of live for those months. But in the summer, she had to work as a waitress in a restaurant to make ends meet. And so that sort of angst about, I thought I knew how the system worked, and I did everything I was supposed to, and look at me, I've ended up here. Is that the way it works now? That was what she was asking, and we started out the book because it was so representative of what we heard in this Persona project. We heard it over and over again, which is like, I thought I did everything right. I thought I was doing what you're supposed to do, and it doesn't seem to be working.
But Roger, when you say that teachers were not being paid or they were not able to make enough money to make ends meet, that's a very startling statement because these are educated people. So that also undermines the very possibility of education for the future.
Yes.
A lot of people will get disenchanted with the idea of education because if they don't educate themselves, it also has a huge repercussion on how democracy will function or how what you would call as how democratic capitalism will function.
Absolutely, right. I mean, and as you know from reading the book, one of the things we focus on is the degree to which it is a complex adaptive system. It is a really complex thing in all sorts of pieces have to work, and one piece that has to work, right, is what you said, the education system. If the education system does not work, and a vast majority of people don't get well educated or get less well educated, that has a ripple effect on everything else in the economy. And of course, the truth is that it used to work, right? Uh, it Teachers used to make an income that enabled them to live at least a comfortable life, and they, like the rest of those people around the median income in the economy, could expect that the economy would grow at this rate, which it did up till 1976. From the time we started actually measuring median income, it grew at 2.4% real. And why that matters is 2.4% real means it doubles every 30 years. So that would mean if you were like an average, American family at the median looking across the table to your kids, you could literally say to your kids, chances are when you're sitting across the kitchen table from your children, you will be twice as well off as we are today. That's not bad, right? That's a good, kind of an attractive vision for the future. Yeah, kind of now, if you're that same father sitting across the table from your kids, all you'll be able to say is, kids, if you have kids and they have kids and then they have kids, right? Those kids, right, will be twice as well off as we are today, because that increase in real family income is now only going up at 0.6 of 1% a year, which means it doubles every 100 years. Now, is that a compelling pitch? I think the first pitch is pretty compelling. Hey, kids, if you go to school, you work hard, you could be twice as well off as we are today. Versus, kind of the fourth generation down the line will be twice as well off as today. That's not, to me, a compelling pitch to say, wow, that must mean our economic system is the best system imaginable. No, it's not. And that's not happened before in America. Full stop. That has not happened before in the history of America. That length and that magnitude of stagnation. The Great Depression was less of a stagnation. It lasted for a shorter time, and the recovery was greater than what's experiencing now. And that, I think, is an amazing fact, right?
So that's a very startling set of information that you're sharing. And then, of course, you share some very interesting numbers, and that is on productivity growth and how wage has diverged over a period of time. Because that's also a very worrying trend, because that also says that the corporations are possibly making tons of money, they're accumulating a lot more wealth, and then people are not really getting better endowed as you're actually looking at growth.
Right. Yes. Once again, I point to the 70s as a time when things just changed. If you look at the numbers, things changed, and I mean, you're pointing to one big one, which is up till the mid 70s, about 72, 73 in this case. If you were talking about productivity and wage growth, you were talking the same thing, right? The lines were like they just were the same. It was like they were identical, and then productivity continued along, right? And wages stopped, right? There was just like boom, a different situation. So yes, workers have been over the last 40 years helping the economy become more productive every year consistently, and literally have shared only a tiny bit of that, like a fraction, like a tenth, not quite, a little bit more than a tenth of the increase in productivity that they've helped generate. Now, have workers generated the productivity entirely themselves? No, increased capital and technology, all of that. But you'd want, I think, anybody who'd say, I care about democratic capitalism and the populace as a whole would want the rewards of productivity to flow at least to a substantial extent to workers. Like, I think it was great when essentially it was a one-to-one relationship. But you wouldn't even have to be that doctrinaire to say, well, maybe it's 50%. Well, it isn't even close to 50%. How about a quarter? A quarter, maybe a quarter of it flows to, nope. It's like, 15%. That is, again, that is as far back as we've been able to measure that, because we don't have productivity, and wage numbers back forever. But as far as we can measure it back, that has never been the case in America, and now it is and has been for 40 years.
So that's quite fascinating. And but then, like when you talk about the Biden administration, it is trying to do something about it in terms of saying we are possibly going to eliminate the student debt. We are actually going to ask enterprises to increase wages. Do you think that might solve the problem a bit, or we are still getting deeper into the mess as we are talking about this?
I'm an optimistic guy, so I guess I'm hopeful. Would I guarantee it? Well, no, because I do not think there's been a recognition of the fundamental flaws in the way the economy is managed. So I haven't heard anything from the Biden administration that says we kind of are getting that this is a complex adaptive machine that our economists simply cannot understand as much as they wish they could, and we've got to take a different perspective on it. It's been more, and remember in the book I say every time kind of economic economists or public policy folks say, oh, I know what lever to pull. I'll pull that lever, and the following results will be they don't get the results that they expected. And I see a lot of kind of bravado that you get out of a new administration, right? To say we'll pull this lever, we need to have this infrastructure program, so we're going to raise corporate income taxes because the corporations have to pay more. My prediction is the rise in corporate income tax rate is not going to increase revenues from corporate income taxes at all. And it's because it's a big, complex, adaptive system, right? And what do corporations do in the modern economy? Right? They adapt globally to tax regimes, right? And that's why corporate income taxation as a percentage of income tax takes in the OECD has been falling and falling and falling, right? It's because they structure their operations around the world to do that. I am a fan, by the way, just so you know, I'm a great fan of Scandinavian kind of tax philosophy, right? And I wish we adopted that in the U.S. So people think of Scandinavia as a super high tax regime. It's not, right? They are a super clever tax regime. So if you just take Sweden, for example, Sweden basically says to Swedes, we're going to run a heck of a country here. It's going to be a great country with great social services, a great safety net, good environment, etc. And for that privilege, if you want to actually enjoy all of that as a person, you're going to pay high personal income taxes. And then they go to the corporations and say, you have one important job: create high-paying jobs, which we will then tax, right? We will tax the person holding that high-paying job, who has the privilege of living in Sweden. And so they have exceedingly low corporate income tax rates. This is smart, right? Because corporations are very mobile, right? People are not nearly as mobile. And if you create a great country, people do not want to be mobile out of that great country. They say, I want to live there. That's smart taxation. American taxation historically has been the stupidest taxation in the OECD, other than France. And France, it's pathetic on everything economically, pretty much. So of the entire OECD, the United States has historically had the stupidest tax system, right? It says, we're going to make America a great country, and for that privilege, you're going to pay exceedingly low by OECD standards personal income tax. So we're actually not going to charge you for the privilege. In fact, we're going to make it a bargain basement kind of place. And all you corporations, because you're just like rich individuals, we should tax the hell out of you. America has until recently had among the highest tax rates for corporations, income tax rates for corporations. So the corporations say, okay, I hear you, no problem. You don't want us here, and so we will try to earn as much income outside America as humanly possible, and we will create jobs outside America. Right? That's been the thing, and literally under the last administration, even though like people don't like that last administration, they finally took action on that and brought American corporate tax rates down. Now, what I would have loved to have seen in that alongside that is raising personal income tax rates to get more Scandinavia-like in the structure. So I can't get all giddy about the fact the Biden administration has increased corporate income, or is in the process of increasing corporate income tax rates, because it'll just make the American tax system stupider, right? Plain and simple, just stupider, less effective. This is not a right-left issue. This is a smart, stupid issue, and we're going stupider. So there just has to be an understanding of the economy behind these things, and I wish there was. Like Sweden is not, last time I checked, a right-wing country, right? Why can't we have taxation like Sweden? Why does America, by the way, is the only OECD country without a national VAT?
This is interesting, Roger. And before I turn to Mr. Maira, I have one more question. In fact, I'm sure he will have a lot of questions on this. But then you said, like it's about right-wing populism and how democracies will turn. And you've also touched upon something very important in your book, and that is about how people are getting disengaged from politics. They are probably feeling disenchanted how things are happening, because all this becomes a political economy question that you're trying to answer. And this is possibly giving rise to what you would call as the authoritarian leaders or right-wing leaders or populist leaders and things. Like, so how do you really look at this situation as well?
Well, I mean, I don't. You're saying that. I don't say that in the book. I do not. There's a side of me that just does not love the dialogue around populism and populism is bad, right? Like, I mean, that's literally what people are saying, populism bad. I think there are kinds of political movements that are bad, but just the fundamental idea that a large percentage of the population feels that they're being left out, and calling that kind of populism and that's bad is not. I mean, to me, it doesn't compute. I mean, I guess in some sense, right? I've always cared about the average man or woman in my country, right? I care less about the high tail of the distribution, the highly educated, kind of wealthy people. I just don't. And so what I care about is, like, I think what is a great country? A great country is a country in which the median families prosperity rises consistently over time. We tax the richer tail of the distribution to make the lives of the poorer tail of the distribution better off, and in particular, we spend in ways that create mobility for that left tail of the distribution. We can't create utopia on Earth, but we at least can create a situation in which those in the lower tail of the distribution are aided in mobility by the transfer of wealth from the highest part of the distribution. So that's what I care about. That's the basic equation for me. And 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 if while we do that, we kind of make sure we take care of the planet and not have the planet kind of suffer grotesquely because as we try as we try and perform that little dance that I've just described. That's a that's a good country. And if you don't have that happen, right, then in my view, bad things start to happen, and you get a people sort of giving up and saying, kind of blow it up. And I think we've had these elections in recent past that have been blow it up elections, right? Brexit was a blow it up election, right? Or vote. It was an election. It was a blow it up vote. It's sort of like, and it's probably apocryphal, but it just makes for such a good story. That the number one search term in the UK the day after Brexit was, "What is the EU?" Right? So the country voted to blow up something that it didn't actually know what it was, but what the hell, let's blow something up because we're not happy. And in my view, in many respects, the Trump win was a blow it up win, right? It was drain the swamp, blow it up. And did the Trump voters know exactly what they wanted to blow up? No, they were just mad, and so let's blow something up. So that do I like that form, if you want to call that populism of populism? No, I'd rather have the population broadly be saying, I am going to stay involved politically, and I don't want to blow things up. I want to migrate them in a direction that is better for us.
Sure. Mr. Mehra, over to you, please.
Thank you so much. Roger, it's been such a privilege and a pleasure to be with you here today. I have been following your work for the last 30 years, reading, following, and learning behind you and researching myself. So when Amit begins introducing me as a foremost economist, I'm glad to say that I never studied economics formally. Unlike you, I never did. And when
you're better off. You're better off then.
In some ways, yes, I don't have to unlearn things which are ingrained in me. So when I joined the Planning Commission, I was invited by Manmohan Singh, Prime Minister Manmohan Singh, to join the Planning Commission. I thought he'd made a mistake, and I told him, "Sir, I've never studied economics," because it was assumed that if you are in the Planning Commission of India, you must be an economist, of course. Everyone who's advising policy is supposed to be an economist. And he said, "But that is why." He said.
Did he really? Interesting. That's smart.
I have been following you a bit too, and I was highly honored. And it's your fresh perspective about modeling, which doesn't come the way economists model things. Yes. And you've been pointing this out. Integrative thinking is something that you have been promoting. And as you said, in integrative thinking, you can keep and should keep two models, which seem to be in opposition in mind. Pick into them and pick the best from them and create something which is better. Don't get stuck into one model or its apparently opposing model. So as you said, then I began. I was a physicist actually, and physicists model and love to model, and engineers love to model physical systems. Began to recognize, this is before I joined the Planning Commission, this is while you were at Monitor and I was with the Innovation Associates and Arthur D. Little, that there are two types of systems. There are the mechanical engineered systems, and then there are organic, adaptive, self-adaptive systems. And they both are systems, and they both have some architectural principles by which they run. Now coming to the profound thing which I'm struggling with, and the world is struggling with, I guess, is the conflict between capitalism and democracy. When the sort of the end of history happened with the collapse of the Soviet Union, as Fukuyama said, it was the forever victory of a model, but actually there were two systems inside that model. There was democracy and there was capitalism, both of which were supposed to have won against the Soviet Union, because one was not socialist, it was capitalist, the Western system, and also it was democratic and not authoritarian. However, it's these two systems now, which were the victors, were quarreling with each other. And I feel that they both are running on very different principles of decision making and governance and power. In the capitalist system, it's based on, it's right that if you own more of something, you have a greater say on how that should be run or used.
Yeah.
Okay, so property rights, and therefore in a corporation, those who own more of it should be allowed to have a greater say on how the corporation shall be run. But you come to democracy, which says whether you own something or not, you have an equal say on how the system is going to be run. One heart and soul. And so, when both these principles combine in one system, which is a country or the world, they are like an AC appliance being plugged into a DC socket, and there's a blow up. And we are beginning to experience that blow up of two systems which are conflicting in the basic principles of governance in them. And so I'm coming to a question for you, though, but let me just explain a little further. You see, I'm finding, like you explained very well, that people are not mobile because they want to and need to live for various social reasons and other reasons in their own countries. Finance can be very mobile, and businesses, when become run by financial principles, they can move themselves wherever they want to because that's what is easy to move across the world. So the principles by which financial globalization is operating more and more are making it life much easier for migrant capital and very hard for migrant labor. And we've experienced this in the COVID time here in my country greatly. And before that, of course, as you know, migrants trying to get into Europe and to America, very, very hard for people. So life was becoming harder for people, that is the beating hearts, and much easier for people who had the money and accumulated more money and they could take it wherever they wanted to. And to save taxes on that money. So the thing is, how does one change the system? And that's what Dr. Manmohan Singh sort of put to me. That look, he is within a system. He can't suddenly decide that it's going to be something else because he needs the people presently in power to, and the other wealthy people, because he needs their money and taxes to be able to fund and do things for the common people. So it's the design of governance, how decisions are taken and who takes them. And this is where in the capitalist principles about if you have the money, then you must have a greater say because of course we do need your money to help do other things. How do you think we're going to change the ideas of governance within corporations and in economies?
So I mean, I think I have sympathy for your diagnosis. I guess I consider it more of just a tension, though. Like so it's a tension that I think between capitalism and democracy. I mean, I think one of the reasons why I care so much about democratic capitalism is it's just this lovely thing that is full of tension that the kind of the leading democratic capitalist countries in the world have somehow managed to structure and manage that tension, and I would argue that worked well in America up till 1976, approximately. And I use that, obviously because it's the 200th it's the bicentenary of America. So I think the fact that it worked for as long as it did says it's not unworkable, right? And then that just leaves the question: well, why did it stop working? Which I write about in the book. We pursued efficiency, and again, the democratically elected governments pursued efficiency as much as the corporations. So this wasn't the corporations, the capitalist corporations are doing something bad and the governments are doing something good, right? The governments were pursuing efficiency. They said we must deregulate, we must let companies kind of merge and ignore the antitrust laws. We must open trade and say freer trade is always better. All those things were not done by corporations, right? They and in some sense, I think there's a greater danger in campaign finance from from rich people than there is from corporations. It wasn't as though the corporations had such a strong voice that they were forcing governments, the U.S. government, to obsess about efficiency to this extent and tilt things in the direction of obsessive efficiency. Right? It was democracy, the democracy side doing that. So what I think it is fixable, and we've just have to walk away. There's a cliff of sort of absolute worshiping at the feet of economic efficiency and just using these proxies for it and pushing and pushing and pushing. We simply have to walk together back away from that. And I think the tension between democracy and capitalism can be managed. Can it be made to go away? Right? Kind of no. Right? This reminds me, we were both in an industry, me, Monitor, you, Arthur D. Little, a crazy industry where people worked like crazy, right? Young people working like crazy, and consultants would be in my office bemoaning the work-life, home-life balance, right? And Roger, you have to help me fix that. I'm having trouble like balancing between trying to advance my career at Monitor and be a good husband or a good wife and good father, good mother. And I would say you're looking to make something go away that won't ever. The best you can do is manage the tension between those two things. And what you're now complaining about in my office, which is fine, is you've gotten unbalanced, right? You've got unbalanced in the work-life direction. I can help you think about how to get it more balanced. I can't help you make the problem go away. I would say that's the same thing for the economy. We cannot make go away the tension between how capitalism functions and how democracy functions, but we can manage that tension in a more productive way than we have now. And I think, as I say in the book, everybody's got a role to play. If we just use corporations and the government for the moment, I talk about citizens and educators too, but the corporations and governments, corporations have to be smarter about the degree to which they pursue efficiency with proxies that are not effective proxies. And I think governments just have to just stop worshiping at the altar of economic efficiency. They have. It has been a kind of a trend, a dominant theme, a dominant trend in government. And again, people have to be careful. They're acting as though it's a left-wing, right-wing thing. No, over the last 50 years, there's been exactly equal control of U.S. government, federal government, of Democrats and Republicans, right? 30 of those years have been a Republican president and 20 a Democratic president. 30 years have been Democratic control of Congress and 20 years Republican. It's half and half. And both parties have drunk the Kool-Aid of economic efficiency. And so they've got to knock it off. So I may be slightly more optimistic structurally than you are on this front.
No, I'm very optimistic. Just to follow one short question.
Okay.
You said about economists. It's about economists. It's a change within economics. A change within economics. And I'm finding, as you said, that whether you're right wing or left wing, the populism movements come both sides. The people have lost confidence in economists. The
Absolutely.
People have lost
and they should.
Economists.
They should. You know how? Excuse me. You know how they talk about peak oil, right? We've reached peak oil. We've reached peak economists, right? We're going to look back on the grand sweep of history, and we'll be able to pin it down only in retrospectively and say it was somewhere around between 2000 and 2010 we reached peak economists, where economists had the highest status. They were believed kind of reflexively to the greatest extent kind of ever And wow, and we're in 2050 now, and it's like, wow, if the peak was, let's say, 2007 at an index of 100, we're at 30 now. Isn't that amazing? And back in kind of 1935, we were at 30. So it went from 30 to 100 back to 30. I do not think economists are ever, even though ever is a long time, going to be as prominent in decision making as they were 10-ish years ago. The peak is somewhere around there. It's conceivable to me the peak was kind of a day before the global financial crisis, and because right, economists were fundamentally behind the global financial crisis. Right? It was essentially Fed easy money from 2001 to 2008 that drove that, and then the economists were like, "Gee, that's too bad. We didn't think about that." No, you didn't think about that. Oh, how about that? Shouldn't if you're gonna pull levers like that, maybe you ought to think about it first. So it could be that peak economist was 2008-9. I think that's potentially the case. But I'm as you correctly pointed out, I'm trained originally as an economist. You're trained as a physicist, which as a little side thing. When I took over as dean of the Rotman School, the school is now named after Joseph Rotman, the late Joseph Rotman, a wonderful prince saint of a man. And the minute I got named as dean, I got a call from the president's office saying, the donor, now that we've named a dean, he desperately wants to meet you. And I said, well, that's great. And we had this lovely dinner. And he asked me, how would I, if I were starting with a blank sheet of paper, how would I change the MBA education and the MBA program? And I said, I would wipe out. So it's really 4 semesters, right? Fall and spring, first year, fall and spring, the second year. I would wipe out the entire curriculum of the fall and teach only 2 things all fall: physics and philosophy. and he was like, well, that's intriguing. Why? And I said, well, physics is the most basic science of how things work. Yes. And philosophy is the most basic science of how people work. And business is nothing but the integration of how people and things work, right? Yes. And so instead of starting at the applied level, we're going to teach you marketing, that all of those disciplines, marketing, economics, whatever, build on top of the basic sciences that underlie management. And so what I'd rather do is make sure everybody is grounded in how things work and how people work, and then we can build apps on top of it. I mean, that would be a fall first year of Windows, and then the rest of Office, right? In some sense. So I'm interested that you're a physicist, and I would argue that you're better positioned than an economist to imagine how an economy works, actually. Sorry to say, but I mean, having an economics education is not a bad thing as long as you don't take it too seriously, right? And I always used to do that when I was sitting in economics classes, right? And I went to a very good university for economics. I went to Harvard, which is supposed to be pretty good at economics. And I kept saying, especially in macroeconomics classes, I said, really? You're really? You think you can say that? What? You're so sure about that? Like microeconomics was a little easier for me to say, okay, yeah, curves cross, I get that, whatever. But when I blew it up to macroeconomics, I was like, I just couldn't believe, even as a 21-year-old or 18, 19, 21-year-old, I was like, how can they be so cocksure, right, about how they think things work? Anyway, I've gotten us distracted, but I just thought you are correct. People have lost faith in economists, and it will never, in my view, come back. We've gone past peak economists.
Thank you.
Stunned silence.
No,
that's
I'm
a
just
classic.
saying,
That's a classic rant.
no. I am again following you, and I'm
I'm
feeling
just kidding.
encouraged. I'm feeling encouraged because I did write a long essay during the COVID, reflecting on all this, and the title of my essay was "Who Do Economists Serve Really?" And I was quoting
Mhm.
Nobel laureates in economics, especially recently, who are questioning their own economics.
Yes.
Joseph Stiglitz, Abhijit Banerjee, recent Nobel laureates, and of course going back. And so, as you're right there, that even the economists are beginning to question their own economics. But what I
Yes.
find very amusing in a way is that they will not accept something unless an economist said it is true. Like people
Yes.
have emotions, unless there's a Nobel laureate economist who said, oh, you've got to have an economics
Yeah.
around emotions, then it is not a valid idea. But the
Yeah.
rest of us as common people, we know these things. So that is why we say, you guys seem to be locked in your own bubble,
Yeah.
writing for each other, debating each other. What about us?
Yeah.
Please into the
No,
wisdom.
it's true, and most people, for example, and how, like, you quickly went to Nobel laureate Stiglitz, and so yes, being a Nobel laureate in economics, I mean, it's a massive prestige factor, and you believe that you must listen to such people. Most people do not know how you get to be a Nobel laureate in economics, right? What happens is the Nobel Committee goes to extremely learned economists, academic economists who are in the center of that, and asks them for their opinions, and then people get appointed from the middle of the beast, essentially, to put together a dossier on various economists to be considered by the Nobel Committee. So the economics profession has total control over who gets to be anointed as a Nobel laureate, and you can't get to be a Nobel laureate in economics unless you pay complete fealty to the field, right? If you are an outsider to the field, it is not possible with the process as it is for you to get to be a Nobel laureate. So in that way, Arun, it's like massively self-healing. So you have to drink the Kool-Aid to have the opportunity for a dossier to be put together by other people who've drunk the Kool-Aid for you to be anointed, and then you get listened to. And the funny thing about Nobel laureates is as the two of this call probably know, is you have to have written about an extremely narrow field, right? To be dominant in an extremely narrow field. What do all Nobel economists, not all, most Nobel economists do the minute they get the Nobel Prize in economics? Start pontificating about everything under the sun, right? Like, think about all the things that Paul Krugman writes about in the New York Times that he has zero background in. Lots, right? But most of them he has no back. But he's Paul Krugman, so therefore it must be right. But we passed peak economists, and people are going to start saying, what the hell does he know about that? And he's being totally declared, and it will be thus and such. I know for sure. No, you don't. If you go back and look at all the work that you've written about, you never written about that except in the New York Times.
Amit, can keep monopolizing and enjoying this conversation, but I think there are other people here too, Amit. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mehra,
Thank
for
Yeah.
taking a few questions here. But then, Roger, like I have a very interesting question from Sylvia, who's joined us, and says, like,
Yes.
how do you see the situation in 5 years from a global point of view in a corporate enterprise? And what kind of changes would be necessary to improve the situation in general?
Well, I mean, I lay out a whole lot of things in the book about that subject. The overarching answer to Sylvia's question is if we start with corporations, where she started the question, is corporations have got to stop using imperfect proxies for efficiency and and then attempt to maximize those proxies, right? So corporations will say, we have to have efficiency in our labor costs. So how will we get that? The normal answer is keep wage rates down and get rid of excess redundant staff down to the last person. That will make us more efficient. And so if corporations continue to do that, they will be grinding down the wages of the median family and making sure that the swing voter is feeling less and less comfortable and confident in the economy, and they won't be more effective, right? This is why I use the example of Costco. Now, maybe global viewers may not know all that much about Costco, but it's a low price point retailer that's arguably now the most successful, profitable retailer in America, and it has this more sophisticated system dynamics view of labor, and at a time when minimum wages across state by state, there's not a federal minimum wage, is in the range of $9 to $12. The lowest waged employee in all of Costco is about $21 an hour. So it's not even in the ballpark of close to minimum wage in a sector, retailing, where that's where the biggest proportion, that and food service food preparation are the two lowest wage job classifications in America. It's just out of sight. It's like double, right? And nobody's making them do that. They just say that, and they're competing not at the high end. They're not Nordstrom's. They're competing with where you've got to deliver low price points for customers to go. They pay an extraordinary amount. They also have an approach which is to say, we know what the algorithms tell us for staffing in the stores, how many labor hours we need on the store floor for the given traffic levels, and we'll staff to that level and just add in a slush factor of some extra staff, right? So they would be considered. And by the way, we're going to train our people, spend more of our time training people than any of our competitors. So you could say, oh, how inefficient is Costco? Terrible. How can you even stay in business being so inefficient? But that's not their measure of efficiency. Their measure of efficiency, right, is, do people love to shop at Costco? And if they do, the stores will be full of people. Their shopping carts will be full of stuff, and we'll be fine. That's a much more sophisticated view, and they believe. Jim Senegal, co-founder of Costco, if you talk to him today, will say, they'll come to the store and they'll fill their basket if they're served by employees who are happy, who want to serve them. There are enough of them around to help them out. Those employees are not worrying about, am I going to get food on the table for my kids tonight, or a roof over our heads? They're totally comfortable kind of with that. And those employees will be even happier if they realize that everybody in the corporate head office started there. We're entirely promote from within. We simply don't hire people in from the outside. You've got to work your way up. So everybody who's actually a clerk on the shop floor thinks that they can be CEO someday, and they're not delusional. They can, because that's where future CEOs and executive vice presidents come from within. So what I'd say is corporations have to start thinking in that more system dynamics way, right? Rather than this linear way. If I chop, because I'm sure there would be hedge fund managers who would say, I want to take over Costco and bring some sense to their insane labor policies. And we could double profitability if we just cut wages in half, fired a bunch of people and got them being more efficient. And they'd be right, probably, that for a quarter or two, right, if you chop those costs, the customers would still come, but after 2 or 3 years, the customers would stop coming, and the company would be worthless, and you'd have to sell it out of bankruptcy, right? So having that more system dynamic view of business is what corporations, I think, have to think about. They have to stop, kind of believing that you must kind of reduce everything to little silos, eliminate all slack, use these proxies, these surrogates that are imperfect. And if they do, corporations can succeed to a greater extent than they're succeeding now, in a way, as with Costco, right, that raises the wages of the people in the middle of the distribution. And what do you think they're going to do with those wages, Amit? Right, buy more stuff. It'll be good for the economy. They'll buy more housing. They'll buy more education. They'll buy more healthcare. All things that stimulate the economy. So we're making it. Corporations are making this a zero-sum game in a way that they don't need to, right? And that's the kind of corporate behavior that we need to get out of this.
So, Roger, like there is a very interesting follow-on question to this, and one of the authors is asking, and he says like, and going back to one of your previous points, like metrics like Genuine Progress Index has been showing that there is stagnation and reversal of well-being since 1970, and something exactly what you've been alluding to. So why hasn't a metric beyond a GDP that has really come up or has become very popular? Because that might actually help us solve a few problems. Because I think what you're really saying is also our absolute obsession with GDP, corporate profitability, and so on and so forth.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I really think that the reason is that they say in real estate, right, possession is 9/10 of the law, right? In models, possession is 99% of the law, right? It took a while for GDP per capita to become the standard way of thinking about measurement. And if you read my one of the books you mentioned, The Design of Business, I talk about reliability versus validity. And the world kind of has a love affair with reliability, and was willing to sacrifice a lot of validity for that. So GDP is a reliable system, right? You know how to collect it. You know what goes into it. There's a general agreement on all of that. Like if you put 100 economists in a room, perish the thought, they would all say, be able to state the definition of GDP per capita. And if you then said and remind me how you measure, they say, oh, you collect this information, this information. So you have a system that's reliable. It produces a consistent, reliable outcome. You can tell, within months after the quarter what India's GDP was that quarter and how much it grew from the previous quarter. The systems you're talking about are more valid, right? They're a more valid description of how economically well we're doing in a more holistic way. And so there's a desire for those, but they're less reliable, right? The definitions of the things that go in them are more judgmental, right? And for many people, that's just a bad thing. For me, they're not. I'm a validity-oriented person. That's why I say things like, you shouldn't do either or. You should build something better. You shouldn't think of it as a machine. You should think of it as complex. So I'm sort of a validity-oriented person. I always want I'll sacrifice a little reliability for validity, but the world is biased in the other direction. So these reliable but invalid measures hang around for a lot longer. Now, the good news, right, to me, is that the validity of GDP keeps getting undermined more and more. And that's part of the process for changing. And so what I'd say to the person asking that question is, keep pushing, hang in there. GDP will go as the dominant kind of measure of economics, but it'll take way longer than anybody who's validity oriented can even barely can tolerate. But that's the way the world works. Possession is 99% of the law when it comes to models, and it takes a hell of a long time to tear down an old and useless model.
And of course, like we are coming towards the end of the interaction, Roger, but I have to ask you, one big question. Any final remarks? And what would you suggest are the 3 big books that people should read in these present times, which could actually add on to the thinking?
Oh, interesting. Well, I'd hope they'd read this book. You know, I think the American pragmatist philosophers are super important, and I would I would read John Dewey's Art as Experience. It is a complicated and difficult book, but it gives, I think, a way of thinking about how you should experience life in a way to get better at understanding the world around you. So, and people will be mad if they pick it up. They'll say, "God, this is a very difficult to read book." Oh, The Good Job Strategy. Zainab Tan. She's an MIT Sloan professor, so at the Sloan School of Management, has written a brilliant book about how you can turn bad jobs into good jobs. And oh, I forget the name of it. You know what's Lawrence Lessing's book right on campaign finance reform? He's a Harvard Law School professor, Lawrence Lessing, Lessig, and he's had a book about two years ago, it's probably 5 years ago now, on campaign finance reform, and you know, I'm an economist, businessman kind of person. I think there's another legal political side of this that I'm less kind of adept at, and he comes from that perspective and has a good perspective. So those are books that I think that are well worth reading.
Thank you, Roger. And in fact, as all things have to come to a close, but I would recommend everybody on this chat that you should read this book, When More Is Not Better, Overcoming America's Obsession with Economic Efficiency, to really get more insights out of what Roger is saying. I think this has just been a very, very interesting interaction. And I think one thing that really hit me was the idea of peak economist. And I think that'll stay with me for a very, very long time. Roger, thanks a lot for joining us today and being with us. It's just been an honor to have you with us. Thank you, Mr. Mehra, for being with us today. It's just a pleasure. Thank you, Roger.
Well, the honor is mine, Amit, and it's great to reconnect with an old friend, and very nice to meet a new one.
Thank you, Roger. Be well, be safe.
Thank you, Roger.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye-bye.